My name's Perry, and this is banqueting stuff, which is basically served after the main meal, and the sort of just a few of the persons holding the meal will invite their very, very special friends to come to this. And I'm going to take it back in because it's raining and
oh, typical, isn't it? Just after two things. I'm making syllabub, which is whipped up cream with wine and sherry and a bit of sugar. This is made of, I think, willow twigs, but I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take it in. Oh, isn't that typical? Yeah.
In this case, it's using a lot of sugar and spices, and sugar was considered a spice in those days. And have we got the sugar cone? Oh yeah, that's how sugar. This is a small one. They were a lot bigger. That's how sugar was bought, and you just chipped away. So it was very expensive, as were the spices. So this is really going. Gosh, look at me! I'm so rich. I can afford all this, which is served at the end of the meal, but only for a chosen few friends. So that's what we know as marzipan now, but it was called marchpane. So a sort of conceit of bacon and eggs, and just sort of faffing around. This is white gingerbread, which the middle bit is marzipan, but flavoured with ginger and cinnamon. And it's basically, gosh, I am so rich, I can afford all this. And also I can afford to have someone faffing around making these things, because it does take time, and I spent most of the morning just doing this. But there's a couple of very good books. One's called Banqueting Stuff, which is about a lot of recipes, because there are other things. I've got prunes in syrup, which is basically prunes that have been soaked overnight in red wine, and then various spices and sugar just boiled up with it, so it becomes very syrupy. There are other things. If you a good person to look for, his Instagram account, Ivan Day, and he's a food historian, and he makes the most amazing things. And there was an exhibition in the beginning of 2020 called Feast and I can't remember the name of it now, but it was at in Cambridge, and it was very much sort of all the wonderful foodstuffs that you could find. But Ivan is well worth following on Instagram if you're interested in the history of food. Yes, that will be served to the officers at the end, and at 1:30 the officers will be dining, and that is worth watching because there's an etiquette about dining, which will be explained. So well worth staying around for that.
What happens is that all these plates will have stuff on, including this syllabub. We will put it all on the table at one go, and they can pick at whatever they want, whether it be sweet or savoury or anything. They would sit down for this meal. If you were doing a really posh meal, you might have an array of dishes which would then get taken away and another lot come out, and you could do that several times. But at the end of the meal, they would move away from the table. They might even have a separate little building called a banqueting house where the banqueting stuff would be served. And that was somewhere where they would stand up and, again, help themselves to the food. But they could circulate and talk to whoever they wanted, not just the people they were sitting next to. because the important people would be sat together and they might want to talk to somebody of a lower status. And the banquet was a time they could do that. And at the same time, the staff, the servants, would be clearing away the main meal and maybe eating some of it themselves or giving it out to the poor at the gate and clearing up. So it was quite a useful time. But they would have all sorts of sweetmeats and nuts and things, and they would, as you've seen what Perry's done with the marchpane, they would have lots of things made of sugar. There's a story of one meal where they had a long table with a river of mercury, of all things, flowing down it, and a ship made of icing approaching a castle made of icing and firing little guns at it, just as a decoration really on the table. Very impressive, I'm sure, but it apparently left the room full of smoke. So what they did was to give all the ladies eggs, which had the egg blown out and rose water put in, and they were told to throw them at each other to sweeten the air. A lot of money just for a bit of theatre, really. But if you had the money, that's what you did. Now, you can tell it's a cold day because this cream is not thickening up like I would expect. All through the summer we've had really hot days and it's gone in about 2 seconds. Not today. She'll be here for a while with this. Oh, come on, think about it at least. No.
And how often they eat?
That's a good question because it changed as time went on. The main meal, I think, would be dinner, which is sort of early afternoon for us. And then they would sup. They would have supper later in the evening. Where's my husband? He knows things. He's disappeared, of course. They would probably have breakfast, but the meals tended to get later in the day, and then something else would be put in. Because they got hungry, strangely enough. No, I don't do that. We do have a herbalist here. She's down that way, I believe. No, she's over there. But no, I don't do that sort of thing. But they would probably have somebody quite close by who did. Lots of herbs were grown and used, and there were really 3 types. There would be culinary, so in cooking. Then there would be strewing herbs. They would spread them on the floor to sweeten the house, and of course the medicines. And a lot of it did work. Not all of it, but quite a few of them did work. I mean, they knew that willow bark, the tree being salix, produced salicylic acid, which is aspirin, for instance. Digitalis, foxgloves. They knew you couldn't take very much of it, but a little might do you good. So they did have some ideas of it. But in the meal times, what were they in our period?
Dinner, which is the main meal of the day, is probably between 11 and 1, starting at some... If you go back 100 years, it's even earlier. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning. And then by our period, it's probably nearer noon. And then supper, which is the other main meal, will be about 6 o'clock. And that's driven by the light. No artificial light. The cooks need to be able to see what they're doing. So you have the main meal as soon as you can get it ready after breakfast, and then the supper has to be served before it gets dark. Breakfast is quite small and it's probably just leftovers from the day before. Maybe some bread, maybe some cold meat, jug of ale, something like that. Not a big important meal. If you can get, which we can't do because we don't have a proper kitchen, but
It's roasted before the fire,
Fire.
so in front of it.
So not over. People always think that the flames are there and the meat is above it, but it's not. The flames will be here, and you'll have the spit rotating in front of the flames. And it's a very good way. It makes very nice. We've had it once or twice, and it's a very, very nice way of cooking meat. It's not very practical in the modern kitchen, of course. But that. One of the things about Hampton Court, going back 100 years before our period, or a little bit more, was that Henry VIII, if you were at court with Henry VIII, you had a choice of 2 different roast meats at every meal, every dinner and every supper.
And they would be feeding how many?
Yeah, Hampton Court Palace, fully staffed, was about 1,000 people, and they were getting 2 hot meals a day. The kitchen staff was about 200 to support that.
So big household at the top.
A big household. And this house would have been a similar size. This house was 300 plus rooms. Huge, must have had a huge staff. We don't have the details, but again...
Go and add some things into that.
Right.
It's finally thickened up. Oh, sorry.
My name is Graham Soane. I am an Englishman and I am reenacting a time in the 17th century which we often call the English Civil War, although it was across the whole of the British Isles. At the moment I am showing how the things that a small time farm, a farmer with very small plots of land. There were farmers with much bigger plots and they often had sheep on them because that was a better crop than having people working on the land. But I am pretending to be a small farmer who was a musketeer, but now I'm older. My son has taken my place in the regiment and my lord has allowed me to go back to the farm. My wife was very fortunate, this is my story, that her father and mother had only the one daughter, my wife, and they died and left a tannery, which is a commercial building dealing with animal skins to make into leather. And with the money from the tannery, we have made a purchase of more land. In other words, I'm saying that I am becoming a more respectable, a wealthier farmer. And because of that, both my son and my daughter, our son and daughter, can be educated in the basics of arithmetic and English writing. My daughter will need that because one day she will marry a man who needs a wife who can look after his accounts. This is the sort of thing perhaps we think they did. In fact, between the previous century and this one, the 17th century, the 16th and the 17th, socially there were lots of changes. In the 16th century, it was often the case that if you wanted to marry the woman of your dreams, you had to go on bended knee to their mother and father. By the 17th century, which is the 1640s in our case, it was a little bit more friendly and casual, but you were still expected, if you were a respectable man, to be able to go to the parents and say, I am completing my apprenticeship and my job and I have a place and I would wish to marry your daughter. So people think that perhaps in those days they married young, but only the very rich did that, and that's because there were contracts between the daughter of one rich person and the son of another to bring their lands together. But with my level of society, which is working but not poor, you would need to show that you had a good career and you could provide for your future wife. So what I'm doing in my case here is showing the children who come things like looking at the hay. You can play with the hay again. That little boy is playing with hay, or making a fence, making a hedge, and that is so that if you had a vegetable garden, you'd want to keep the rabbits and the deer out, so you'd need a fence. And you wouldn't make a very fancy one, you'd make a basic one. So I'm using different bits of wood to make different things because that was one of the staples of the time. I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rami and I'm a musketeer for the English Civil War. Currently at the moment I'm taking a day off and sitting with my lovely wife who's a herbalist.
Yes, I'm Kitty, hi, and I'm the local cunning woman. So I work on herbal remedies and cures for your everyday illnesses and things, aches and pains, stuff like that. So I'm matching up here some rosemary, sage and some thyme, and I've got some lavender and some rosemary and cinnamon, bay leaves and nutmeg here as well. But yes, that's what we're doing today.
So in here we've got tobacco, which would have been very expensive for the period. So first brought over from America, they'll start developing these clay pipes to smoke out of. As you can see, the hole is very small because it's very expensive to buy. So soldiers would have had these cheap disposable clay pipes for their tobacco. They also thought as well that tobacco helped clear the system, so it was healthy for them to smoke. As we know now, it's not that healthy, but yeah, they believed in miasma, so bad smells would cause diseases and harmful things, and they believed tobacco smoke to cleanse the area.
And for what, cheese and apple?
This is just our lunch. Okie dokie. So lavender in the 17th century was used spread on floors and in your bedding to try and ward away the lice, basically. So if you're worried about illnesses or lice bites, you want some lavender in your bed. Things like sage and rosemary and thyme, you might mix into spirits, into brandy and things like that to kind of make cure-all drinks. And then things like nutmeg, ginger, those sorts of spices you might also mix into drinks for things like sore throats or colds, and that would be kind of your everyday herbal remedy for that.